What's up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to share with you two stories of when I was a home health nurse. I am going to have you guys laughing because the foolishness that ensued and that I encountered in these two stories will have y'all on the floor. Let me preface this by saying that very early on in my home care career, I had no clue what was going on. Like, I knew I was going to the homes of patients and doing things. Like, I was educating patients on their chronic disease illness. I was doing wound care, I was doing medication management, but I truly didn't understand my role as a home health nurse. Anyway, I had an admission to do. I think it was one of my first admissions that I had. It was a gentleman who was in the hospital for a few weeks. He had an infected spacer in the knee. And so they had to go in, remove the spacer, treat him with antibiotics. I think they replaced the knee spacer and they put some kind of antibiotic therapy within the knee. But then when they discharged him, they wanted him to continue IV antibiotics at home. So they discharged him with a PICC line. A PICC line is very similar to an IV, except it can stay in for up to 6 months. So I was going in to admit this patient to home care, set him up with his antibiotics, and just, so that was that. I was a little bit nervous because it was my first IV admission as a home health nurse. So I woke up that morning, he was my very first admission. I drove to the home, got there, went in, had my paperwork, had my nursing bag, had all the supplies that I needed. The pharmaceutical company shipped him all of the antibiotics. So when I got there, he had those supplies at the home, right? So we go through the paperwork, he signs the consent that yes, he's consenting to having home care, he consented for me to treat him, so on and so forth. So I did his whole assessment, like checked his vitals, listen to his lungs. We have to do all of that in home health, just as you would with a patient in the hospital. And so now it was time for me to change his PICC line dressing. Now he said to me, "Are you sure you want to change it? Because they just changed it yesterday when I left the hospital." And I'm like, "Yes, I have to change it because now you're under our care. I have to do an initial assessment of that PICC line." So he was like, "Okay, let me clear my bed." Now, the one thing I want for you guys to understand is that when you're walking into someone's home, you can walk into a whole bunch of nonsense, okay? You have patients that have homes that are very clean. You have patients that have homes that are very disorganized, stuff everywhere. You have patients who are hoarders. So being a home health nurse gives you a different perspective. You actually get to see your patient in their home living environment, which I think is very important. And it also broadened my perspective and my outlook as a nurse and even as a human being that, wow, some people really have it hard out there, So it kind of makes you a little bit more empathetic. Anyway, so this gentleman, he's like, "Okay, let me clear off my bed." Now, let me tell you this. This man was probably in his 60s, right? Like early 60s. And he lived at home with his mom and his dad. So mom and dad was somewhere like in the 80s, right? Like in their 80s. So he had his own room. Mom and dad had their own room. It was just very odd. So he clears off the bed and he's lying down. So the PICC line is in his arm, in his upper arm. And I'm going in, carefully following all of the sterile technique, going in to change the dressing or whatever the case is. And as I'm getting ready to change the dressing, I take the old dressing off. The line is fully exposed. Now, the IV line, this PICC line, is not sutured in, okay? It's just staying in place with like a special device that locks it into place. It's called a stat lock. So once I remove the dressing, the line is exposed. Now, of all the craziness that can possibly happen, this man in their home, they had like 3 or 4 cats, right? And one of the cats would not leave him alone. So he wanted the cat to be in the room because whatever, the cat was very close to him. So typically as a home health nurse, we're not supposed to have pets around. Like you're supposed to tell the patient and the family, get rid of the pets, lock the pets up. We're not supposed to have them out because if they attack the nurse, then it's something different. So he was like, no, he really needs his cat to be there. The cat won't leave him alone, all this stuff or whatever the case is. So I was like, all right, sir. So as he's laying there, I removed the dressing. Why the cat came jumping from the windowsill? I don't know where I didn't even know the cat was on the windowsill. Why the cat jumped off of the windowsill onto the bed? And his reflex caused him to move that arm to swat the cat away. Why the PICC line came out. was mortified because now the PICC line is out. And what that means is that he now cannot get his first home dose of antibiotics. And I'm going to have to send this man back to the hospital to get another PICC line inserted. I could not believe it. Y'all, everything happened so fast. So he was like, oh gosh, the line came out. And I was like, yes, it did. I told you we shouldn't have had that cat in there. So of course now my visit is prolonged even longer than anticipated, right? So what I had to do now was I had to document what happened, document that he couldn't get the first dose of antibiotics for the day, and then I had to call the hospital. Mind you now, I'm calling the orthopedic surgeon because it was ortho that was managing his knee. Orthopedic surgeon is the one that wrote for him to get home care, to get the continuous antibiotics at home. And when I call the hospital, of course it's going to take 1,000 years for me to get in touch with the orthopedic surgeon. I explained to the clerk, like whoever I was talking to on the phone, what happened, and I explained to them why it was urgent. So they ended up text paging the doctor with my phone number, and the physician calls me back. So the ortho doctor is like, what happened? I explained to him the entire scenario. So I was like, the PICC line came out. He's like, how did the PICC line come out? I said, well, I was on the bed. He was laying on the bed and I was changing the dressing, and the cat, it sounded so crazy. I said the cat jumped off of the windowsill onto the bed and he moved his arm to swat the cat away, and the line came out. The doctor was like, this is some unbelievable blank, S-H-I, blank. And I was like, yeah, I know, crazy, right? He was like, I'm going to have to set him up so he can come back into IR, which is interventional radiology, to have another PICC line placed. And he's like, I don't know if I can get it done today, maybe tomorrow. So he took my number. He said he would set it up and he would call me back, right? So anyway, I eventually ended my visit with the patient and I said, listen, I am going to call you back later to let you know when it's time for you to go back to the hospital so they can put another PICC line in, and I'm going to come back tomorrow. Whatever time they put the PICC line in, I'm going to come back so we can continue your antibiotic, right? So he was like, okay. So then we get up and we're leaving. He's walking me out, and his father and his mother is in the kitchen, and they're asking, so did everything go well? So he's looking all crazy, talking about, no, the line came out. And they're like, what? The line came out? And he was like, yeah, the cat jumped on the bed, and he explained to them the whole scenario. And then, so they're asking me, well, what's next? So I'm telling them he's going to have to go back to the hospital either maybe today, if the doctor can get space for him today. If not tomorrow, he's going to have to go back to the hospital to get a new PICC line placed. So then the father is like, I'm going to have to drive you into the city? So the patient is like, yeah, Dad, you're going to have to drive me. I'm going to need a ride to get there, because the patient wasn't driving. I don't think he had a car. And either way, he couldn't drive because of his affected knee. So the father's like, well, I hope camera heated up. So I had to take a break and come back. So yes, as I'm leaving, his father is like, so I'm going to have to drive you into the city. So the patient's like, yeah, Dad. And the father's like, what time? And he's like, I don't know. We're waiting for the doctor to call back. And he's like, because I don't go into the city past 2 p.m. And I'm like, Lord have mercy. Anyway, so I told the patient, I said, don't worry. I told the dad also, don't worry. I don't know what made me do this, but I offered. I said, if the appointment to have the PICC line replaced is past 2 p.m., I will come and give you, no, I didn't say I was going to give him a ride. I told the father, I said, if it's past 2 p.m., you can drop him off and I can pick him up and give him a ride back home. Because I think, yeah, it was something like that, right? Long story short, the physician ends up calling me back later on that day, had an appointment for the patient to go in the next day to the interventional radiology department to have the PICC line replaced. So it turned out that the father dropped him off at the hospital. And then once he got the PICC line placed, he called me and he was like, the PICC line is placed. I'm ready. You can come pick me up from the hospital, like whenever whenever you have a chance. And I don't even know what made me do that. I look back now and I was like, girl, are you crazy? But I felt bad for him because financially he didn't really have it. His father wasn't trying to go back to the city. His father was like in his 90s, fussing him out. So I was just like, oh my goodness. Like I felt like, let me just be a good person. Let me just be a decent human being and do a good deed. So I ended up seeing all of my patients for that day, and I went down to the hospital and I picked him up and I dropped him home. I didn't tell anybody that I did anything like that. No one knew. So I picked him up, took him home. He was so thankful. And that same evening when I picked him up, I ended up resuming like the care and started him on his he had already received a dose of antibiotics for that day because he was in the hospital. I think they gave him a dose while he was there. And then I went back the next day. So I saw this man 3 days in a row. The first day was when the line came out. The second day when I picked him up to drop him off home, and then the third day I went back to like continue the process of antibiotics. So that was like that is the first story. The second story, it's even crazier. See, I'm laughing now because thankfully I didn't sustain any kind of consequences for a lot of this nonsense that I experienced in home health. I swear to God, God be just looking out for me all the time because he knows my heart and he knows that I mean well. Second story, I was still new to home health. And when I say new, just about a year. Like I'm still trying to figure things out. And the problem is with home health is that you go in and you meet people and you get a soft spot in your heart for them, right? That the lines of being a nurse and being a friend or being a person that really cares for them can get blurred. So setting boundaries is something that's very important as a home health nurse because people forget that I'm there to do a job. I'm not there to be your friend and help you out, okay? I'm not your support system, but it can be that way if you're not clear. And I don't think I was very clear initially. So this story now, I had an elderly lady who was wheelchair bound. She lived at home with her daughter, but her daughter worked during the day. Her daughter worked like 7 in the morning to like 4:30 in the afternoon. Now this poor lady, wheelchair bound, the daughter would get her up in the morning before she left, got her bathed, got her dressed, put on her Depends, and put her in her wheelchair. Then like around close to midday, the daughter's boyfriend would come before he went to work because he worked like second shift. He would come and assist her to go to the bathroom. He would change her Depends if it was soaked or soiled, and then he would go to work. And then by that time, like later on in the afternoon, the daughter would be back home. So basically this elderly lady, she was somewhere in her 80s, very sweet, very kind. She was home by herself all day, 5 days a week. So I started seeing her for her CHF exacerbation. Basically, I was doing a lot of disease process teaching, medication management, keeping in contact with her primary care doctor on how she's progressing, so on and so forth. So one day I happened to be in the neighborhood, and for whatever reason, my phone rang with an unknown number. Now, for this home health agency I was working for, they gave us a device. Like the device that we documented on was a Samsung Galaxy. So it had the home health software on it. And it was also my phone, my work phone. So a number was ringing and I'm like, well, who is that? So I answered it, hello? Guess who it was? The patient's daughter. She called me. She's like, Kendra, I'm so sorry to bother you. I know you're not seeing mom today and I know you're busy working, but mom is at home in the wheelchair. She had a really large bowel movement and I really don't have anyone to go to the home to clean her up. The boyfriend wasn't around. He had already went to work, whatever. She was like, if possible, please, if you're in the area, do you mind stopping by? Like they always left the side door near the garage open. So I knew that. She's like, do you mind just stopping by and going in and helping her? Now in home health, those issues are not an issue of the nurses. It's not the home health agency to fill in for these problems. Basically, family members are supposed to provide either 24-hour care when the home health nurse is not available. As a home health nurse, your job is not to go in and clean the patient up and do tasks. Your job is simply to go in, do the teaching, do the wound care. And of course, if I go into a home and my patient's soil and they have no one to help them, I'm going to clean them up. I'm not going to leave somebody messy, or I'm not going to leave somebody and say, oh, I can't heat up your lunch. But that's really not the job of the home health nurse. So of course I was like, sure, I can stop by or whatever. Just let me see one more patient and I'll have a break in between and I'll go over there. So I go over there and I forget what this lady's name was. Not that I was going to tell y'all anyway, but I go in and she was like, Kendra, I'm so sorry. I had a big bowel movement. My daughter isn't home. Her boyfriend already went to work. And you know, my daughter said she was going to call you. Thank you for coming. So I go to the home, and of course I wheel her to the bathroom, get her cleaned up, get rid of the diaper, trashed it and everything like that, right? So put on back some new Depends. She's nice, she's dry, put some cream on her butt, put her back in the wheelchair. I noticed, so for that, okay, being that, so this is what happened to, I now remember, guys, I'm telling you the story and I'm just remembering things. Because I was going to the home, I had called the home health office and said, put me down for a PRN visit to go to this lady's house. Because liability, I don't want to be in somebody's house. Something happens and I'm not supposed to be there. So as a home health nurse, aside from the regular visits that you do with the patients during the week, you also have the ability to put in for PRN visits just in case something came up. So she had PRN visits. So I called them and I said, plug me in for Miss Such and Such. I'm going to go to her home to check on her or whatever the case is. So the scheduler put me in for a PRN visit. So while I was there, obviously I have to do a quick assessment on her, document an assessment, so on and so forth. And what I noticed was, because she had CHF, congestive heart failure, I noticed that her feet was really swollen. And that is because she sits up in the wheelchair all day with her legs down. So I'm like, oh my goodness, these legs are swollen, girl. Let me go ahead and prop them up. Y'all, I wheeled the lady over to another chair, right? I wheeled her and I put a chair in front of her. And I went to go pick her legs up to put it on the chair so that way they were elevated. Did her wheelchair not flip backwards? And now she's on the floor. When I tell you, I was mortified. I'm still thinking about it I could not believe that happened. I was like, WTF. How did this happen? The wheelchair that she was in was so light that with me, I didn't even calculate the fact that, damn, it's light. And if I lift her legs up, gravity would have it so that the wheelchair would flip. I didn't even consider that. Yo, this lady was on the floor. So of course I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And she was like, it's okay, I'm fine. And I'm like, are you sure? Did you hit your head? Did you hit anywhere? Because now I'm thinking, I'm gonna have to call 911 and send her out. But she was like, no, I didn't hit my head anywhere. She didn't hit the table, honey. She just landed on the floor with the wheelchair. So I went, helped her back up, got her back in the, she's in the wheelchair, put the wheelchair back in seated position. And I'm like, oh my God, what do I do now? What am I going to tell this lady's daughter? What am I going to tell my manager in the office? So I told the patient was like, it's fine. I'm not mad. Things happen or whatever the case is. She was like, it's okay, it's okay. So at first, I'm not even going to lie. I was like, should I even call her daughter? And then I said, you know what? I'm not even messing with this lady, because lo and behold, her daughter could come home and she could be like, oh, my head hurts. I had a fall today. I was like, nah, I ain't fooling with you, sis. What's your daughter's work number? What is your daughter's work number? I called her daughter back and I was like, such and such, I apologize. I'm calling to let you know that after I changed your mom, I noticed that her feet were really swollen and I wanted to prop them up. And in the midst of me elevating her legs, her wheelchair went backwards and she fell. And the daughter was like, oh, Kendra, thank you so much for letting me know. Is mom okay? I'm sure mom is going to be fine. I'll be home by 5 o'clock. If anything changes, I'll call and I'll let you know. And if I need to take her to the emergency room, I will. I said, I think everything is okay for now. I will see her again tomorrow, which, the next day. But I told her, in the meanwhile, like you said, if anything is wrong, please send her out 911, because I don't need those kind of problems. Set her up, made sure she had everything within her reach, and I was out. I drove straight to the office, went straight to my clinical director's office, and I was like, guess what happened? So I'm telling them the story, and it's like 3 of them in the office at the time, and they bust out laughing. And I was like, why is that funny? I was like, I am mortified. And they were like, Kendra, things happen. It's home health. Things happen all the time. You would be so surprised at some of the weirdest things that have happened to all of us working in the field. That's what they refer to it as in home health. You're working in the field. They say the good thing about it is you obviously have a high level of integrity. You called her daughter. You made sure the daughter was aware. Notified the physician. Make him aware also. And you came and you told us. We're just going to do an incident report, a fall report. You're going to see her tomorrow because she's scheduled for a visit for tomorrow, and you're just going to follow up. That's it. You know, it wasn't any malintent or you didn't mean to do harm, so it's okay. But I don't even think I fully recovered from that incident till today. I don't think I'm fully recovered from it. Like every time I think about it, like I'm traumatized all over again. Like right now I'm thinking like, whew, like my heart rate's beating a little bit fast because I'm like, I'm reliving the moment again because I remembered how I felt in that moment, mortified. So those are my 2 home health horror stories. I have more that I can share, but maybe some other time. If you have any questions about home health, let me know in the comments. Also, some of you reach out to me on Instagram. I don't really use my Instagram page like that. I do have a personal Instagram page I can share with you all, but I'm not on Instagram too much. I'm usually on TikTok and, of course, YouTube. Thank you all for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.